Westfield, New Jersey is the kind of town people move to when they want to feel safe. It is an affluent suburb characterized by its manicured lawns, low crime rates, and historic architecture. In 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus believed they had found their forever home here, 657 Boulevard. A grand six-bedroom Dutch colonial built in 1905, it represented the culmination of years of hard work. But 3 days after closing on the house, before they had even moved their furniture in, a single piece of mail arrived that would change their lives forever. The envelope was white, addressed in thick, blocky handwriting to the new owner. Inside was a letter that didn't read like a typical neighborhood welcome. It began warmly enough, but the tone quickly shifted into something deeply proprietary and observant. The writer claimed that 657 Boulevard had been the focus of their family for decades. They identified themselves only as the Watcher. The letter contained a chilling directive. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out. Derek Broaddus was alone at the house when he first read those words. At first, he thought it was a prank, perhaps a disgruntled neighbor or a bitter runner-up from the house auction. But as he read further, the details became too specific to ignore. The writer knew the Broadduses had 3 children. They knew the children's names, listed in order of birth. They even knew the nicknames Derek and Maria used for them. The Watcher wrote, "I see you have flooded the house with young blood." Was that a hint? I need to know the names of the young blood so I can call to them and draw them out to me. The police were called immediately. Officers from the Westfield Police Department were initially baffled. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints on the letter, and no DNA under the envelope's seal. The Broadduses reached out to the previous owners, the Woodses, who had lived there for 23 years. The Woodses admitted they had received one strange letter right before moving out, but they had dismissed it as a one-off oddity and thrown it away. They had never experienced anything like this in 2 decades. A few weeks later, a second letter arrived. This one was even more aggressive. The Watcher seemed frustrated that the family hadn't moved in yet. The renovations the Broadduses were doing, painting the walls and sanding the floors, seemed to offend the writer. 657 Boulevard is anxious for you to move in, the letter read. It has been years and years since the young blood ruled the hallways of the house. Have you found all the secrets it holds yet? Will the young blood play in the basement? Or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. The psychological toll on Derek and Maria was immense. They stopped bringing their children to the house. When they did visit to oversee contractors, they stayed in groups. They began to look at everyone in Westfield differently. Was it the neighbor to the left, whose easel was positioned perfectly to see into the Broadduses' windows? Was it the man behind them, whose porch had a direct line of sight to the backyard? Private investigators were hired. A former FBI profiler, Robert Ressler, was brought in to analyze the letters. The profile suggested the writer was an older individual, likely someone who felt a sense of entitlement to the property. The language was archaic, almost theatrical, suggesting someone who spent a lot of time reading or someone who lived in the past. The investigation initially focused on the Langford family, who lived next door. Michael Langford had lived in the house since the 1960s and was described by some as eccentric. However, there was no physical evidence linking him to the letters. When the police interviewed him, they found nothing to justify an arrest. The Langford family maintained their innocence and eventually grew resentful of the suspicion. The Broadduses grew desperate, they installed high-end security cameras and hired undercover security guards to sit in the back of vans on the street. Despite this, the letters continued to arrive, always postmarked from Newark, which meant the sender was traveling to a distribution center to hide their local tracks. The community's sympathy eventually curdled into suspicion. Rumors began to circulate that the Broadduses had buyer's remorse after realizing the mortgage was too high, and that they were sending the letters to themselves to get out of the contract. This theory gained traction despite the fact that the family was losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees, taxes, and renovation costs for a house they couldn't live in. 6 months after the first letter, the Broadduses put 657 Boulevard back on the market. But the story had gone viral. Potential buyers were terrified. No one wanted to buy the Watcher house. The family attempted to sell the lot to a developer who wanted to tear the house down and build 2 smaller homes. But the Westfield Planning Board rejected the proposal after an outcry from neighbors who feared it would ruin the aesthetic of the boulevard. The Broadduses felt trapped. They were paying for $1 million home that had become a prison of their own making. In 2017, they finally managed to rent the house out. Shortly after the new tenants moved in, a 4th letter arrived. This one was specifically directed at Derek. It was the most violent letter yet. It referenced a car accident and a mysterious illness, suggesting that the Watcher was now following the family to their rental home and watching them even outside the boulevard. "You are despised by the house," the writer claimed, and the Watcher won. In 2019, 5 years after the nightmare began, Derek and Maria Broaddus finally sold 657 Boulevard for $959,000, a loss of over $400,000 from their original purchase price. They left behind a note for the new owners, including a photo of the Watcher's handwriting so they would recognize it if a letter ever arrived. To this day, the identity of the Watcher remains unknown. Forensic evidence from one envelope showed the presence of female DNA, which shifted the focus away from Michael Langford, but no matches were ever found in any database. The case remains a haunting reminder that the places where we feel the safest, our homes, our quiet neighborhoods, can be the most vulnerable to those who watch from the shadows. The new owners of 657 Boulevard have reported no new letters, leading some to believe that the Watcher's goal was never to harm the young blood, but simply to ensure that the Broaddus family never called that house a home. The Watcher claimed to be the guardian of the house. In the end, they guarded it so well that they drove its owners into a 5-year exile. Somewhere in Westfield, the writer may still be there, looking out a window, waiting for the next new owner to arrive.
Subscribe to Mr. Dark Knight.